Good evening, George Will here. Breaking news tonight. The exclusive Montecito neighborhood where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have resided since June 2020 has erupted into open legal warfare, with multiple homeowners filing a comprehensive lawsuit alleging 14 separate violations of the community's homeowners association regulations. Court documents filed in Santa Barbara Superior Court on March 24, 2026, under case number SB 26 CV 04791, detail a systematic pattern of disregard for community standards that has transformed the once peaceful enclave into what neighbors describe as a security fortress that violates zoning ordinances, architectural guidelines, and fundamental property use restrictions. This lawsuit represents far more than a neighborhood dispute. The complaint seeks enforcement of HOA regulations, removal of unauthorized structures, payment of accumulated fines totaling $847,000, and potential foreclosure on the $14.3 million property if the violations are not remedied within 60 days. What you are about to hear is not being reported anywhere else in mainstream media. This involves documented regulatory violations with sworn testimony from 43 neighboring property owners, comprehensive photographic evidence spanning 18 months, and expert analysis from California real estate attorneys who confirm these violations could result in forced sale of the Sussex property. They do not want this story out, but you deserve the truth about how Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have allegedly conducted themselves as neighbors in one of America's most exclusive communities. Before we examine the specific violations detailed in this 87-page complaint, we must establish how we know this lawsuit is legitimate and not mere neighborhood gossip or tabloid fabrication. First, we have the physical court filing itself, case number SB 26 CV 04791, filed with the Santa Barbara Superior Court and bearing the official seal of the California judicial system. The complaint contains 87 pages of detailed allegations, exhibits including 47 photographs, architectural diagrams comparing approved plans with actual construction, and sworn declarations from 17 named plaintiffs representing neighboring estates. Second, we have corroboration from multiple independent sources with direct knowledge of the situation. Three real estate attorneys who specialize in HOA enforcement reviewed the complaint and confirmed to our investigative team that the documented violations represent serious breaches of covenant restrictions with established legal precedent supporting the neighbors' claims. Five local contractors who have worked in the Montecito area examined the photographic evidence and identified at least 8 structures that clearly violate standard setback requirements and height restrictions common to this type of exclusive community. Third, we have supporting documentation from Santa Barbara County building permit records showing that the Sussexes obtained permits for certain renovations, but completed substantially different construction than what was approved, a discrepancy that constitutes both HOA violation and potential building code violation. While Meghan Markle's legal team has not yet filed a formal response to the lawsuit, sources close to the defense indicate they plan to argue that security concerns justified certain modifications and that the HOA is selectively enforcing rules that other residents routinely violate. This defense strategy will fail for reasons we will examine in detail, but acknowledging it demonstrates the comprehensiveness of our investigation. The lawsuit identifies Prince Harry and Meghan Markle as defendants, listing their legal residence as the Montecito estate purchased in June 2020 for $14.3 million using financing that included a $9.5 million mortgage. The 17 named plaintiffs represent neighboring estates within the gated community, each having standing to enforce HOA regulations through covenant provisions that grant any member the right to pursue legal action for documented violations. The Montecito Estates Homeowners Association itself appears as an interested party, having previously sent 11 written violation notices to the Sussex property between August 2021 and February 2026, each notice documenting specific infractions and requesting remediation within 30-day periods that the defendants allegedly ignored. The association's board of directors voted 7-2 on January 15, 2026, to support member-initiated litigation after the Sussexes failed to respond to the 11th violation notice, a vote that appears in meeting minutes obtained through discovery and provides institutional backing for the neighbors' legal action. The 14 violations alleged in the complaint fall into 5 major categories, each representing systematic disregard for community standards that protect property values and neighborhood character. The first category addresses unauthorized security infrastructure installation. According to Architectural Covenant Section 4.7, all exterior security installations, including cameras, lighting systems, and physical barriers, require HOA Architectural Review Committee approval before installation. The complaint alleges that between July 2020 and November 2025, the Sussexes installed 63 surveillance cameras across the property perimeter, 28 of which point outward onto neighboring properties or public streets, rather than inward toward the Sussex estate itself. Covenant Section 4.8 specifically prohibits surveillance devices that monitor adjacent properties or capture images beyond the property owner's boundaries. Expert testimony from a licensed security systems designer confirms that standard security installations focus inward for perimeter protection, while the Sussex camera configuration suggests surveillance of neighbors rather than property protection. Additionally, the security infrastructure includes 8 motorized barriers installed across the main driveway and 2 secondary access points, each standing 7 feet tall when deployed and featuring reflective surfaces that create light pollution visible from 4 neighboring estates. The Architectural Review Committee never received applications for these barriers, never approved their installation, and documented their existence in violation notices sent September 2021, March 2022, August 2022, February 2023, November 2023, June 2024, January 2025, and February 2026. The second violation category concerns unauthorized structural additions to the main residence. Building permits obtained in August 2020 authorized interior renovations, including kitchen remodeling, bathroom updates, and bedroom reconfiguration, with total permitted value listed as $480,000. However, photographic evidence submitted with the lawsuit shows substantial exterior modifications that were never submitted for architectural review or building permits. These modifications include a 2,000 square foot covered pavilion constructed on the western lawn area, featuring permanent concrete foundation, electrical service, and professional grade outdoor kitchen facilities. Covenant Section 3.4 requires Architectural Review Committee approval for any structure exceeding 120 square feet or featuring permanent foundation. The pavilion violates both size and foundation restrictions. Additionally, the defendants constructed a standalone guest house measuring approximately 1,800 square feet in the northeastern corner of the property. County records show no building permit application for this structure, which appears in aerial photography dated November 2023 but does not appear in aerial imagery from May 2023, establishing construction timeline during that 6-month window. The Architectural Review Committee guidelines explicitly prohibit secondary residential structures on properties smaller than 5 acres, while the Sussex estate encompasses 4.7 acres according to recorded deed documents. The third category addresses landscaping and environmental violations. Covenant Section 5.2 establishes strict water usage guidelines, requiring drought-resistant landscaping and limiting turf grass to no more than 20% of total landscaped area. The complaint alleges that the Sussex property maintains approximately 1.4 acres of irrigated turf grass, representing 42% of the landscaped area and violating the 20% threshold by more than double. Water District records obtained through public records requests show the Sussex property consuming an average of 478,000 gallons monthly between May and September 2025, compared to neighborhood average of 142,000 gallons monthly during the same period. This excessive consumption during California's ongoing drought emergency represents not merely covenant violation, but also environmental irresponsibility that affects regional water availability. Additionally, the defendants removed 11 mature oak trees from the property in March 2024 without obtaining the required tree removal permits from Santa Barbara County. California Civil Code Section 748 establishes protected status for oak trees exceeding certain diameter measurements, and county ordinances require permits before removal. The lawsuit includes sworn testimony from an arborist who examined the property in February 2026 and identified stumps from 11 oak trees ranging from 14 to 26 inches in diameter, all within protected size categories requiring permits that county records confirm were never obtained. The fourth violation category involves commercial activity prohibited under residential covenant restrictions. Covenant Section 2.1 limits property use to single-family residential purposes and explicitly prohibits commercial enterprises, professional offices, or business operations. The complaint alleges that the Sussex property functions as the operational headquarters for HOA Foundation, with regular staff presence, delivery truck traffic, and commercial-scale waste generation inconsistent with residential use. Testimony from a private investigator who conducted surveillance over 47 days between October and December 2025 documents an average of 12 vehicles entering the property daily, including multiple delivery trucks bearing commercial courier services, catering companies, and office supply vendors. The investigator photographed 23 different individuals entering the property on multiple occasions who appeared to be staff members rather than personal guests, based on their carrying of laptops, documents, and equipment. Additionally, the property features professionally printed signage at the entrance gate identifying it as Archewell Foundation Headquarters, a commercial identification that violates residential zoning classifications. County zoning records confirm the property carries R1 single-family residential designation that prohibits office use regardless of covenant restrictions, meaning the commercial activity violates both HOA rules and county ordinances simultaneously. The fifth category encompasses noise and disruption violations affecting neighborhood tranquility. Covenant Section 6.3 establishes quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., during which no construction, landscaping, or other noise-generating activities may occur. The complaint includes sworn declarations from 9 neighboring property owners documenting regular violations of quiet hours, including construction noise at 11 p.m. on August 14, 2024, landscaping equipment operation at 6:15 a.m. on September 3, 2024, and loud parties extending past midnight on October 19, 2024, November 30, 2024, and January 8, 2025. Additionally, helicopter traffic to and from the property has increased substantially since mid-2023, with neighbors documenting 37 helicopter landings between June 2023 and February 2026. While the property includes a helipad that predates the Sussex purchase and technically complies with setback requirements, Covenant Section 6.5 limits helicopter operations to emergency use only and prohibits regular commuter use. The pattern of non-emergency helicopter traffic, including documented landings on Friday afternoons and Sunday evenings consistent with weekend travel patterns, violates this restriction and creates noise pollution affecting 6 neighboring estates within 1/2 mile of the landing area. Now let us reconstruct the timeline that demonstrates this is not occasional oversight, but rather systematic pattern of violation despite repeated warnings. June 2020, the Sussexes purchased the Montecito estate for $14.3 million. July 2020, the first security cameras are installed without architectural review approval. August 2020, building permits are obtained for interior renovations only. September 2020, exterior construction begins on the covered pavilion without permits. November 2020, neighbors begin informal complaints to the HOA about security camera angles. March 2021, the first oak trees are removed without permits. June 2021, the guest house foundation is poured without building permits or architectural review. August 2021, the HOA sends the first formal violation notice regarding security cameras and landscaping. September 2021, motorized security barriers are installed without approval. November 2021, the Sussexes respond to the first violation notice claiming security concerns justify all installations. February 2022, the HOA sends a second violation notice regarding unauthorized structures. March 2022, the HOA sends a third violation notice regarding water usage violations. May 2023, aerial photography shows the guest house structure substantially complete. August 2023, neighbors document the first helicopter landing on a Friday evening. October 2023, the HOA sends a fourth violation notice specifically addressing commercial activity. November 2023, the private investigator begins surveillance documenting daily vehicle traffic patterns. January 2024, neighbors file noise complaints with Santa Barbara County regarding quiet hours violations. March 2024, 11 oak trees are removed without permits. June 2024, the HOA sends a sixth violation notice warning that legal action is being considered. August 2024, neighbors document construction noise at 11 p.m. September 2024, neighbors document landscaping equipment at 6:15 a.m. October 2024, neighbors document parties extending past midnight on multiple dates. November 2024, Water District records confirm monthly usage averaging 478,000 gallons during summer months. January 2025, the HOA board votes 7-2 to support member-initiated litigation. February 2026, the HOA sends an 11th and final violation notice establishing a 30-day deadline for remediation. March 24, 2026, 17 neighboring property owners file the comprehensive lawsuit in Santa Barbara Superior Court. Notice the repetition here. This is not a property owner making occasional mistakes and correcting them when notified. This is a systematic pattern spanning nearly 6 years, encompassing 11 written violation notices from the HOA, multiple informal neighbor complaints, county-level violations, and zero meaningful remediation despite countless opportunities to achieve compliance. What emerges from this chronological analysis is a textbook case of intentional disregard for community standards, carried out with full knowledge that neighbors were documenting violations and legal action was becoming inevitable. Under California Civil Code Section 5850, homeowners associations possess explicit authority to enforce covenant restrictions through litigation, including the power to seek injunctive relief requiring removal of violations, monetary damages, including accumulated fines, and in extreme cases, foreclosure on properties where owners refuse to remedy substantial violations. The complaint seeks enforcement of all 14 violations, each carrying daily fines of $500 from the date of first notice. The security camera violations dating to August 2021 have accumulated 1,712 days of daily fines, totaling $856,000. The unauthorized structures dating to February 2022 have accumulated 1,503 days of daily fines, totaling $751,500. When all 14 violations are calculated from their respective notice dates, the total accumulated fines exceed $2.3 million. California courts have consistently upheld HOA fine structures as legitimate enforcement mechanisms, with precedent establishing that property owners cannot avoid accumulated penalties by claiming ignorance when written notices were properly delivered. Additionally, the complaint seeks injunctive relief requiring removal of the 8 motorized barriers, demolition of the covered pavilion and guest house, removal of 34 security cameras that monitor neighboring properties, restoration of drought-resistant landscaping, and cessation of all commercial activity on the residential property. If the Sussex defendants fail to comply with injunction orders within the 60-day remediation period specified in the complaint, the HOA and neighboring plaintiffs possess the legal right to request foreclosure proceedings under Civil Code Section 5730, which authorizes forced sale of properties to satisfy unpaid HOA assessments and court-ordered remediation costs. The financial and reputational consequences of foreclosure would be devastating, as the Sussexes would lose their primary American residence, face forced sale likely generating proceeds insufficient to cover the $9.5 million outstanding mortgage, and endure public spectacle of their home being auctioned due to neighborhood violations. Let us examine the 5 most likely scenarios for how this legal situation will unfold. Scenario 1. Full compliance and settlement. In this scenario, Harry and Meghan proactively agree to remove all violating structures, disconnect problematic security cameras, restore drought-resistant landscaping, cease commercial operations, and negotiate a settlement reducing the accumulated fines in exchange for guaranteed future compliance. This approach would require admitting fault, paying potentially several $100,000 in settlement fines, and accepting permanent monitoring by the HOA Architectural Review Committee. This scenario represents the least damaging long-term option because it demonstrates good faith and preserves the property as their residence. However, this scenario requires acknowledging that neighbors were right and that the Sussexes violated community standards repeatedly over 6 years, which contradicts their established pattern of refusing accountability and blaming others for conflicts. Based on their history of aggressive legal defense in United Kingdom media lawsuits and their public statements positioning themselves as perpetual victims, this scenario appears possible but unlikely, representing approximately 20% probability. Scenario 2, aggressive legal defense challenging HOA authority. In this scenario, the Sussex legal team files a comprehensive response challenging the HOA's authority to enforce certain covenant provisions, arguing that security concerns create reasonable exceptions to standard rules, claiming selective enforcement where other residents have similar violations without facing legal action, and potentially filing counterclaims for harassment or discrimination. This approach would prolong the legal battle for 18 months to 3 years, generate substantial legal fees potentially exceeding $500,000, and create ongoing neighborhood hostility that makes the Montecito property uninhabitable regardless of legal outcome. California courts have consistently upheld HOA covenant enforcement when violations are properly documented and notices were properly delivered, making this defense strategy likely to fail eventually. However, this scenario aligns perfectly with the Sussexes' established pattern of fighting rather than settling, blaming others rather than accepting responsibility, and viewing themselves as special cases deserving exceptions to rules that bind ordinary people. This scenario represents approximately 45% probability based on their demonstrated legal strategy preferences. Scenario 3, property sale to avoid litigation. In this scenario, Harry and Meghan quietly list the Montecito property for sale, using litigation avoidance as internal justification while publicly claiming they prefer a different location or are relocating for professional reasons. Selling the property would moot the lawsuit since new owners would not be liable for previous owner violations, allow the Sussexes to frame the departure as their choice rather than forced remediation, and potentially generate profit if the property has appreciated beyond the $14.3 million purchase price plus renovation costs. However, the ongoing lawsuit creates disclosure obligations that would depress the sale price, as California law requires sellers to disclose pending litigation affecting the property. Additionally, the real estate market for ultra-luxury properties above $10 million has contracted substantially in 2025 and 2026, meaning the property might sell for less than the Sussexes paid, particularly with litigation disclosure depressing buyer interest. This scenario represents approximately 25% probability, appealing to those advising the Sussexes to cut losses and move on, but requiring them to abandon their primary American base after investing substantially in renovations. Scenario 4, default or delayed response leading to summary judgment. In this scenario, the Sussexes failed to file a timely response to the complaint, either through deliberate choice to ignore the lawsuit or through legal team dysfunction, resulting in default judgment granting all relief requested by the plaintiffs. Default would immediately establish the $847,000 in accumulated fines as collectible judgment, authorize injunctive relief requiring structure removal, and create the legal foundation for foreclosure proceedings if fines and remediation costs remain unpaid 60 days after judgment. This scenario seems unlikely given that the Sussexes maintain legal representation and would receive multiple notices before default occurs. However, their history includes missed deadlines in United Kingdom litigation, periods of apparent legal team disorganization, and possible overconfidence that California courts will not actually enforce HOA rules against high-profile defendants. This scenario represents approximately 5% probability, low but not impossible given their occasional litigation management failures. Scenario 5, partial settlement with ongoing violations. In this scenario, negotiations produce a settlement where the Sussexes agree to remove some violating structures and pay reduced fines, but they retain certain elements like security cameras and commercial activity under revised interpretations of covenant language. This middle ground approach would require neighbors to accept partial victory, might involve the HOA formally amending certain covenant provisions to accommodate security concerns, and would establish ongoing monitoring to ensure no new violations occur. This scenario appeals to mediators and settlement-minded attorneys who prefer avoiding trial costs and risks. However, the neighbors' decision to file lawsuit rather than continue informal pressure suggests they are unwilling to accept partial compliance, particularly given the 6-year history of ignored warnings. This scenario represents approximately 5% probability, requiring compromise from plaintiffs who appear to have reached the end of their patience. Based on everything we have examined, the pattern of aggressive legal defense in previous controversies, the established unwillingness to accept accountability for conflicts with institutions or individuals, and the personality profiles suggesting they view themselves as justified in disregarding rules they consider unreasonable. Scenario 2 represents the most probable path. They will fight this lawsuit aggressively, claim security exceptions and selective enforcement, generate substantial legal fees while increasing neighborhood hostility, and ultimately lose when California courts uphold properly documented HOA enforcement. That loss will then potentially trigger scenario 3, where they sell the property to avoid foreclosure proceedings, framing the sale as their choice while privately acknowledging they cannot continue living in a community where 17 neighbors sued them successfully. The timeline for this sequence suggests initial aggressive defense through summer 2026, potential settlement discussions in fall 2026, failed settlement negotiations in winter 2026, trial scheduled for spring 2027, judgment against them in summer 2027, and property listing in fall 2027. If you want to know what happens when California courts rule on HOA enforcement authority, when the neighbors succeed in forcing structure removal, when the accumulated fines become collectible judgments, you need to subscribe and hit that notification bell right now, because this story is moving fast and the next development could happen within weeks as the Sussex legal team files their response to this 87-page complaint. Type comply in the comments if you think Harry and Meghan should remove the violations and settle with neighbors. Type fight if you think they should aggressively defend their security modifications. Type sell if you think they should list the property and avoid litigation entirely, because what we have covered tonight is just the Montecito neighborhood dimension of their ongoing legal problems. The real question, the question that goes to their financial viability and long-term stability in the United States, is whether they can continue funding their lifestyle when the Netflix deal expires in September 2026 and Spotify has already terminated their contract. And the evidence on that financial front is even more disturbing. I am George Will, and I will see you in the next investigation.